in those days, they, you couldn't finance anything. You had to save up your money. Didn't finance cars. And very, very difficult to finance houses. Very rare. And so they rented a house, and this is the 80 acres that I was first experienced in. And I have a lot of memories of that little house on this acreage. We had a cow and chickens and so forth, and an outside privy because the inside didn't work most of the time, and we had to go outside, which is real cold in one of those in the wintertime in Iowa. It's not a place you want to go, but that we had to do that. But I wanted to tell you about the snowstorm. I think I was probably about 3 years old when we had a big snowstorm, and maybe I was 2. I just remember it because it was such a dramatic thing. So it was a big storm, and the snow drifted all the way around the house. All 4 sides of the house were covered up to the roof line of it was a 1.5-story house. So you couldn't see out any window. It was just solid snow. And my father, by that time, it was he had a 1937 Chevy, and this would have been, 1940 probably, or 41 maybe. And I just remember such a dramatic thing that he had that car that he had to go out and start to warm up because he was going to drive to work. And he had, in the morning, he tried to get out, could not get out of the house. He had to break the storm door on the back side of the house and tunnel out through the snow to get out to where he could get to the garage to start the car and warm it up so that he could get out go to work and put the chains on and all that kind of stuff like you have to do. And so since he couldn't do anything with the snow other than get rid of it somehow, after breaking the storm door, shoveling the snow from outside the door into a bushel basket. Bushel baskets are about this big around. Carrying a bushel basket full of snow up to the 2nd floor, dump it out a dormer window, come back down and dig some more. And that's the way he dug out. And it might have been maybe 6 or 8 feet or 10 feet or something to get out of the snowdrift till he didn't have to dump it anymore. I don't know, but I know it was a big job. And I remember that, just watching him and kind of in awe of what a big deal it was. We, of course, walked to school. This was during, wait a minute, 7 years old probably. Anyway, during the Second World War, I remember specifically one of the things that did happen that people now I think would just think it would be just terrible is that when we walked to school there, which was probably about 8 or 10 blocks to school, walking to school or walking home, we would very frequently see Western Union telegram delivery boys on bicycles. They all rode bicycles to deliver the telegrams. And when they delivered a telegram, it was about 90% of the time it was because of a death, because of the war. And I remember how terrible it was. And we saw many of these. It wasn't like one, it was maybe 12 during the time that I can remember. And that was just on the route to school and back. And the thing that is so important to know about that is that there was so much, it was all women. All women were home, they weren't working, men were working. If they were around, either that or they were in the war, one of the two. And so it was women with children. And so that when the bicycle showed up and started riding toward a place, the women would be running after that bicycle to go help the other woman at the other end, whoever it would be, they didn't know. So they were always there, depending on, helping each other. It's really neat when you look back at it. So that's the kind of concern we used to have in this world. I don't know that we have that today. I had a friend that had this really super duper bang up job at a bakery washing their pots and pans. He got paid $7 a week for only working 6 days a week. I was working 7. And so that sounded pretty good. He just went after school and washed the pots and pans. I thought, well, it was a racket, making $7 a week for only 6 days of work. And so along the way, he got a chance to move to somewhere. His parents got a chance to move to another part of town. So he just told me one day, didn't call me, told me at school or something that, hey, I'm going to be moving, and would you like to take my job? I said, oh, sure. So he gave me the key and said, okay, you go to work there Saturday. That'd be your first day. I'm leaving. And so I went to work Saturday, and I had the key to get in the back door of the bakery. Isn't that amazing that somebody would give a key to a kid like that? And he didn't even know me, didn't know I was there, I was coming or anything. That guy didn't tell him anything. He got paid on Friday, I guess, and left it to me. And so the baker wasn't there because I went over in the afternoon, and his wife was working in the front. She didn't know the difference. I just went in and started washing them. He did show me how to do it. I'd been there with him before. So I guess she recognized me as having been there, and she figured, well, I was supposed to be there. She didn't know. Anyway, it wasn't very long until the baker came back from the bar where he went. He came in at 2 or 3 in the morning and did the baking, and then his wife came in at 9 or something, opened up the bakery in the front. And then he went up to the bar, and then he would just drink all day long. And then when it was time to go home, he'd come get her and take her home. Probably drunk all the time. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to wash the pots and pans. I got them all washed." And he says, "You don't work for me." I said, "Well, whatever. I don't even remember the boy's name." Said he told me to come to work because he's moved. Oh, he said, okay, well, you want the job, all right, go ahead and do it. As long as it looks like you did it all right. And so that's how I got into that job. And over the time, I worked there until I was past 16. It was probably about 17. And when I was 16, I got a job in the morning of being the donut fryer. And the baker, he was a heavy smoker and heavy drinker, I guess you'd say too. And he used to make dough. I'd watch him when I was there on Saturdays. Sometimes he'd be there making dough, and he'd be kneading the big huge ball of dough, from these big mixers, and he's flip-flopping that thing, which is, that makes you pretty strong doing that. He was a strong guy, and he always had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and about that much of ashes on the end of the cigarette, and he's flopping the thing around, and the ashes would fly, and he just put it in the dough, stir it all up, knead the dough a bunch more. put it over the side to rise, that's so. And then along the way, sometime after that was early on, and then when I was probably 15, another person, he sold out. Another guy bought it, and he said, this smoking thing, stop it. We're not going to smoke in here at all. I'm not allowing anybody to smoke. So. And I warn you, young man, don't you ever start smoking. That's real stupid. Now, if you take a drink, you can feel that. That's good. but don't smoke. that smoking's real bad stuff, and it's messy and dirty and all that stuff. I remember that specifically.
When did you start smoking?
Yeah, when I was about that age.
That's funny. How did you start?
Well, because everybody was doing it, you know, it was the thing to do. And back in those days, it was, you know, a package of cigarettes cost 11 cents, and we bought the cheap kind to buy Wings. Wings cigarettes. They were loosely packed. When I was a senior in high school, and my counselor called me in and he said, you know, you have enough credits that you could graduate in January instead of May if you would take both semesters of senior English this semester. You could graduate, and the only thing if you want to do that, I said, oh yeah, it was nothing. In those days, all we ever thought about was getting out of school and getting on our own. You know, that's all that.
Changed much.
It was a little bit different than today, because we all wanted to do it. Everybody did, and so I said I want to do that, and he said, well, I got to have your dad's signature. That's, you know, he's got to approve it, and then we'll go for it. So I went home and told my dad. He says, well, if you're going to go to college, I'll sign it. If you're not, I won't. I said, okay, I'm going to college. So I had been saving my money, and I did have about a little over $200, $220 or $30, something like that. And I enrolled in college. I actually got there. I had to leave high school before graduating, so I tell everybody I never graduated from high school. But I did everything but get my diploma, and I had to go straight to college. And I had that all arranged so that I had a roommate and all that sort of stuff. And I drove down there to college by myself, and I had enough money to pay my tuition, because my tuition was $222 for a semester of 16 hours. If you took more than 16 hours, you had to pay more. But I had enough to pay for 16 hours, and then I had to find a job in order to pay for my room and board, you know. So I went out the first day, and I ended up getting 2 jobs. So I worked at a gas station, and I had two gas station jobs to begin with. And so I made 75 cents an hour, and did all I could to survive, ate meagerly. Then was, of course, getting closer and closer to the draft. So I knew one thing for sure: I didn't want to go dig foxholes. I wanted to go into the Navy, because, as a matter of fact, about 30% of the Navy back in those days, and I don't know what it is now, but it stayed, that 30% stayed all my time I was in the Navy till when I retired in 1982. 30% of the Navy comes from the 13 states in the central part of the country, from Canada. I mean, from starting in right straight down through the path, which would include Texas, but it's just a straight shot. Nebraska and Kansas and Ohio, and right the middle part, 13 states there. I ended up getting the letter. Went down. They enlisted me, swore me in on the spot, and I left the next morning to go to, all this within a day. So I went to downtown Chicago, and met a few other fellows there that were coming from other places in the country, and we were supposed to go meet the bus at a certain place, and we met the bus and went off to boot camp, and rode the train, and went to boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Station, and I got all the way through to where I was about a month from graduation, and I got accepted to OCS. And while I was at boot camp, it was a pretty good deal for me because I was the oldest one in my company, since I was actually, by that time I was 21 years old, I guess. I was old enough that most everybody else was 18 and 17 maybe. So I became the section leader and so forth, and I didn't know what I was doing, but neither did anybody else, so it didn't matter. But I was older, so they gave me privileges. and so then when I got to OCS, I became a section leader again because I knew port from starboard and that kind of stuff. I knew enough about Navy terms that I was actually like I'm a real sailor, I'd been almost through through boot camp. At OCS in the Navy was, of course, it was 3 months, 90-day wonders they used to call us, and so we went through 3 months of training. My favorite instructor was a guy that taught navigation, and he was a destroyer sailor, so he just talked about being on destroyers. And I'm so uneducated when I first started out there that he was from Boston, and he had that very, very Boston accent, very real Boston accent. And I remember the first day in his class, he had a chart up on the wall, a big chart. And he had his long teaching wand, and pointing things. And he said, "Now the first thing you're going to learn is this is a chat, and you take your chat and you got to follow the stuff." I don't know what's a chat. I don't know. It's a CHAT. I don't know. That's how bad off I was. But I learned to love navigation anyway. He is a great teacher. When they first let us out, it happened to be the weekend of the jazz festival in Newport, Rhode Island, and I got to hear Louis Armstrong and in real life, which was really neat. And he was kind of the headliner of the thing, so that was a real neat deal. So I said that I want to have a destroyer, and I'd never been to California or anything, so I thought I'd like to go to California. So what's the first town that comes in your mind in California? San Francisco. So that's what I asked for, a destroyer out of San Francisco. And that's what I got. Saturday morning, the ship was underway. So I met the captain and all that in the morning, and boy, was he was one of my favorite captains of all the ones that I've worked for. And he was just a great guy, and you could just tell he was one of those people that the crew loved him. It was great. And so we took off, went out past the Golden Gate Bridge, and of course, as soon as we hit that rock and rolling out there, I was sicker than a dog. And that's when I learned that it doesn't matter what rank you are in the Navy, you clean up your own puke. There's a bucket over there and there's a swab, you clean it up. That's the way it is. So here I've been in the Navy, or I've been an officer in the Navy not even 1 month, and I'm all the way to where I knocked my hearing out. So we were shooting at a sled pulled by a in San Diego. So either before or after, I don't remember which, we made our trip to Massillon. We're shooting, practice shooting like you were shooting at another ship, only it was just a sled that they towed that kind of looked like a big flat thing to shoot at. It was in the shape of a ship, big thing. Shooting at that just for practice, training for the ship and for the reserves. And So I was out on the bridge on watch, watching this, and I was on the starboard wing of the bridge, and we were shooting on the starboard side. And Mount 52, which was, there's 51 is in the bow of the ship, and 52 is right ahead of the bridge, and 53 is back on the fantail or above the fantail. And so Mount 52 slews around and heads way back toward where I was and shoots. And of course it was noisy, and I'm looking through my binoculars to see where the thing goes, and bang, it hit me. And just stupid. Everybody else, I found out later, had cotton in their ears, but I didn't, because nobody told me to put cotton in my ears. I didn't know any better. Anyway, so that's plagued me ever since, and I've still got that problem. And so I've been hearing ringing ever since that, however old I was then, 22 maybe, or 21 or 22. I wanted to go to a newer, more modern destroyer that had all the bells and whistles, and so the ship that I went to was in the shipyard going through a big major overhaul, and they were getting nuclear weapons aboard, and it was a big deal. And so we had an unmanned helicopter that was on the ship, and it was the first of all, called a Fram 1, Fleet or Rehabilitation and Maintenance or something, number 1. So it was a Fram 1, then they had Fram 2, was even more fancy, but ours was a Fram 1. And we were the first ship in the Pacific, at least, to get nuclear weapons. We were a big deal. And so that was the USS Henderson. And I was aboard there for let's see, almost 2 years, I guess. Almost about 2 years. And during that time, we were in and out of San Diego quite a bit because we got out of the shipyard. We were home ported in Long Beach, but we spent a lot of time in San Diego because we'd go in there and spend a couple nights of liberty when maybe go in 2 different times at night just to have the crew get some time to get off the ship. But we're training all day, every day, doing something. And so then I got to date Joanne in those days too, and we got closer and closer. And she was a great girl. And I thought I wasn't too stupid to ask her to marry me the first time I saw her. Anyway, we had a lot in common. That was really the main thing. We were both from the Midwest. We both had the same. It's ironic, but being Michigan and Iowa, not at this time we didn't know any of that. But you know what? Both of our mothers cooked the same way. Used the same recipes, kind of stuff. It was just amazing. On a ship in the Navy back in those days, and I don't know, probably not this way today, but in those days, we bought our own meals. It's still that way, but we also, because we bought our own meals, we chose what we wanted to eat. We had stewards that did the cooking, and they were mostly Filipino, and they were just wonderful people. You know, everybody loved the stewards. They were great young men. They were all young men. They were sending all their money home, supporting their families and at home in the Philippines and so forth. But I got rather close with the young man. He was an E3, and his job was to send. I think he was making an E3 in those days made like $78 a month. And he probably sent $75 a month home. And he did other things like shine people's shoes or whatever he could do to make extra money. And just lived on the ship. Didn't cost him anything to live. Had free food and free place to sleep. But I was so interested in their culture and talked to him a lot about how it was. And he told me that, he said, you know, where I grew up, it's like you think in the movies you see the in the jungle, and people live in these houses up in the stilts. That's my house. That's the way I grew up. And I'm going home when we get to Subic for the weekend. Would you like to join me? Come to my house, my parents' house, or my family's house, whatever you call it. I said, "You're darn right, that'd be fantastic." So I did, and that was one of my great Navy experiences. Since he's the one as a E3 in the Navy, he was supporting his entire family of aunts and uncles and cousins, and I don't know if there's 20 of them or so that lived there together in this little in a little clearing in the jungle, and they had their houses up on stilts, and their houses were about as big as this room, maybe a little bigger, not much. And you had to climb up a rope ladder to get in them. And so and when we arrived, you could smell this stuff cooking. They knew he was coming, and I don't know how we communicated with them, how that occurred, but they had killed a wild pig and had they dug a pit in the ground and put charcoal in there, light a fire, and then they laid the pig down on that, and they put palm branches, leaves, all over the top of it. And they cooked that thing for, I don't know, probably a couple days, I don't know. But that was my first pulled pork that I ever had in my life. And man, that was good. It was so good. They made sandwiches. They had actual buns. I don't know. They were homemade buns, but I don't know where they baked them or whatever. But anyway, they had all that, and they fed. It was all for celebrating him coming home. It was a big deal, and so he's like the famous man in the family because he was supporting all of them. And anyway, so I spent the weekend with them. It was very enjoyable. Real nice people, and got to see how they actually did live. I don't think they probably live that way today, but probably nobody does. They didn't have TV, I can tell you that much. They didn't have electricity, but they were happy people. They were just so joyous to see him. And they were so nice and kind to me. It was great. And when we left there, we did a lot of other things, but we also spent quite a bit of time in Hong Kong. And that particular, the executive officer on that ship had been the aide to the attaché, the U.S. Navy attaché of Hong Kong previously. And so he knew everywhere to go and what to do, and boy, it was really good. So we went to Hong Kong maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 times. Every time we could, we went to Hong Kong. There was a organization, a lady called Mary Sue, that had a crew of people that painted ships when you come in, and they would paint your entire ship, top to bottom, for the garbage. They stood at the end of the chow line and took all of the garbage off of the plates and put it into a GI can, and then took it down to their little sampan boats, or floating like the little tiny boats that they're on. Take it down there, and they put it into something else. And that was, they were working for something to eat. And so a big crew, and she was famous that she was always available. Anytime a U.S. Navy ship would come in, they'd paint the ship. They loved it because we threw so much good food away. And they could paint the bottom on a ship has always got a black stripe that's the water above the water line. So the area at the bottom of the ship is black and the top part's gray. But there's an area above the water line that's painted black all the way down to the water line. So they would paint that sucker, and that would be a straight line. And they're rocking like this. They're down there. These things are rocking back and forth, and they're just going straight line across there, just perfect, beautiful, beautiful paint job. So every ship always got painted when they came to Hong Kong. All you had to do is buy the paint, because the rest of it was free. Can you imagine that? So that's those folks. They are willing to work for whatever it takes to survive, And I think about our people that they're too lazy to do anything, that are not working, that could be working. Not that there's people that aren't working that can't be working. That's another story.
Lord, on this special day, we remember and honor our fallen military heroes who gave their lives to protect us and to keep us safe. I pray for special blessings upon families and friends here who have lost loved ones in military action as they serve the integrity, unity, greatness, and spirituality we once enjoyed. Lord, I pray for the best of hope in the worst of times. Thank you for your grace and the many blessings you have given to us. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much. Let's eat.
Larry, how are you? I'll drop that on the floor.
You don't have to get up. For goodness sakes. The second, not the first one. You missed the First World War.
No, I don't know that. I went in February 3rd, 1943.
43, so you saw the majority of it.
Yeah.
Messy part.
I was lucky on a lot of parts of it. Because an old chief took care of me. I got transferred to Quonset Point, Rhode Island.
Oh yeah, I know.
And no, first I finished gunnery school, and I went to Floyd Bennett Field, because they said everybody's last name goes to 8L. They're going to North Africa. L to Y is going to Pacific. So I said, what happened to Z? That's me. Because you're on a Floyd Bennett Field. But I was only a kid then, so I'm sitting there at the hangar, and the crowning officer comes over to me and says, where do you live? So I'm like a dummy, I said to him, see that pier out there? I said, well, I live a mile down the road from there. Next thing I know, I was in New Brunswick, Maine. And then from Brunswick, Maine, they went to Quonset Point. Then I finally got stopped in Squanah, Mass. Naval Airfield?
No,
right after South Boston.
oh, okay.
It's in Squanah, Mass. That's one of the oldest air bases. And this old chief was there. So when I got there, they took me off flight duty and put me in maintenance. And I didn't like it. I want to transfer. So I said, okay. He said, put me in for transfer. So I got on the baseball team. I was having a great ball going here and there, playing baseball, major league. So what happened was, that was in March, February. So he said to me, in June, guys, your transfer came through. Not June, May. I said, what transfer? You know, I was having a great time. He says, you asked for it, you got it. So he told me, there's 3 drafts. One, you go on the USS Nevada, which took part in D-Day. You ain't going on that. There's one to Port Leone, North Africa. That's where my buddies went. I said, I don't want any part of that. You ain't got it. They need a third baseman at the Naval Air Station in Key West. He gave me that one. He told me, you're too young to die. When I went in, I was 18. 18. I just got out of high school. I got out of school in December, and I went in the Navy in February. My brother had gone in the month before I did. He went to Newport, Rhode Island? Yeah. That's where he went to boot camp. But then he went to Fisher's Island and took up a sonar class. Became a sonar. Then he sent him from New Guinea, and he was there for 2.5 years. And he had a LAE in New Guinea. But he was on the invasion force. Everybody was supposed to hit Japan September 1st before the war ended.
Oh, yeah.
Then all the invasion fleet was getting together to invade Japan on September 1st, 1944. That's when he was supposed to. Wow. And my brother was on that, and he was on they had a big typhoon. He almost lost a lot of ships. They lost.
Well, that's when they lost. Yeah, they lost the whole squadron to destroy.
Yeah, my brother was.
Yeah, they flipped them over.
And my other kid brother became a fireman at a Naval Air Station in Corpus. So when the war ended, they asked us, "Where do you want to be stationed till you get discharged?" So next year I took Corpus. There I met my wife. That's a long story. Now you don't want to know why I'm not. Everybody's, what are you doing? That's the reason I'm here.
So he survived all that, too.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I had somebody watch over me. That's the way I think. The only explanation I got, somebody up there like Rocky Graziano said, somebody up there lights it.
In my whole life, I've learned so many things. I could never pick something that would be the one thing I've learned that's the most important thing that I know. I don't believe. I could, it's all different because of timing and so forth. You go through little periods of time in evolving in your lifetime, and something that is very important to learn right now is different than it was 25 or 30, 40 years ago. So the one thing though that I now want to answer that question with is that the most important thing that I've learned when I've stopped and think about all the different things that are important, the hardest thing to do is to accept change. And I know that because of every older people don't ever want to change. The older you get, the more you don't want to change. When you're young like you are, you want to, change is just something that happens all the time. We have all this change. When I look back at even my lifetime, which is certainly doesn't go back into the very real antique times, but my parents grew up before they had, not before they had the Wright brothers flying, but before they had airplanes going everywhere. They had, when they could go see an airplane fly, that was a big deal. They'd have somebody that would come through with their double-winger airplane and fly around and do acrobatics. That was a big deal. So they learned all about those things. They learned about how to plow with a tractor instead of a horse. All kinds of things that are so different, but it took so long to change. Now we have change instantly, and that's what you experience, and you've grown up experiencing that. And people like me, or people of my generation, and even probably your father's generation even, still have a hard time to accept change. Change is so hard to do, so hard to get to want to do. Now, you look at cars today. You know, if you don't have a car that parks for you, you don't have, you don't have what you need to survive in this world. Or one that you got to have a car that tells you that there's somebody coming up from behind you that's going to run you off the road, or what, or the car ahead is stopping, and you don't have to be smart enough to hit the brake. You know, so life is so changing now. Self-driving cars will be the very next thing. You know, everybody will have one, and that'll be a severe change to me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to let a machine do my driving. I want to do it. So I think just accepting change is so hard, and the older that I get, the worse it is. I don't want to change. I don't want to do that. And so that's the hardest thing I think that I've had to learn, or the most important thing I've had to learn, is that we have to accept change. It's just part of life. You won't find 1 out of 10 people that actually mow their yards. They all hire somebody to mow their yards. Gee whiz, I love to mow my yard. However, I don't physically want to do it right now, so I've changed things. but it doesn't make any difference. It has nothing to do with physical abilities. It has to do with the fact that people don't want to mow their yard. They got businesses that mow your yard. You know, and then we accept change where we used to get a mailman that actually came by and knew us and brought us the right mail and put it in our mailbox, either at our house or even sometimes inside the house. They had a slot in the wall where they put the mail in. That was the way life was. It was so good. You just go, you know, you'd hear the thing go clap, and you'd run over, and there's your mail on the floor or wherever it came in. And it was never wrong. It wasn't somebody else's mail because the mailman knew you. Not now. Now you go to a mailbox down the street someplace, and you know, it's changed. I don't like that. I'm going to bring it to me.
You think it's going to hurt the world when we don't have person-to-person interaction like we always used to have?
Darn right it is. It's yeah. There's more and more of that all the time. So yeah. Anyway, you still running that thing?
Just catching some moments, you know, just catching a little.
But that's a very important thing that, you know, you don't even think about that. That we have to accept all these different changes, a lot of which are not as good as it used to be. Now you go to the bank and you stand in line forever to give them your money. It used to be they had a lot of people there, and they took care of you, and they knew who you were when you walked in the door, and didn't matter if you were a millionaire or a guy that minimum wage. It didn't make any difference. Everybody's a friend, and everybody's treated equally. Now you're only treated that way if you are a millionaire, a billionaire. You know, you got to be a billionaire before they know who you are, probably, in today's world. So, accepting change. Most important thing I've learned, and I haven't learned it very well. So, you can cut it off now. My big answer to the day. Anyway, isn't this a pretty place?